Hey, and welcome to Sillage and Sorcery, a podcast about perfume from the perspective of two witches that infuse their craft with the art of perfumery. I'm one of your hosts, B. Sampson of Venus Invictus, and I'm here with
Melissa Sifjardóttir of Sif Sniffs.
And today we are diving into one of perfumery's most bizarre and strangest materials, Castoreum. I'm so excited. Just animal sacks everywhere. God, I can't believe I just said that. So it's a really unusual substance like the other ones that we've mentioned up until this point. I promise we did say this last week, but we promise that this podcast isn't just about animal musk. But today I will walk you through where Castoreum comes from, the science behind its aroma, and how it's evolved in the world of fragrance. And my co-host will focus on a specific perfume, and I have no clue what it's going to be, and I'm so excited.
So the one hint I will give you is base notes actually factors in highly into the perfume of the week. So
incredible. I love base notes. For those of you that are unfamiliar with what base notes is, it is a website for perfumers and perfume enthusiasts. There's tons of forums and places where you can talk about perfumes. You can get recommendations on ingredients and materials. It's a super fantastic resource for people like us.
Or if you're me, just when you're panicking about releasing something and don't know why it's doing something it's not supposed to, you go on base notes and people very calmly tell you that you're just being a temporary idiot and fix your problem for you.
So let's dive into it. Castoreum, what the hell is it? If you are a perfumer, you probably already know about this material. But if you're the average Joe, you're probably like, what animal are we talking about now? What animal have humans abused to get their scent musk from? So Castoreum is a natural secretion produced by beavers, specifically from their castor sac.
For those of you who are listening, B is once again making a really, really lovely face.
A castor sac? Really? I can't. It is so ridiculous to say out loud. So their castor sacs are pouch-like glands that are located near the base of their tails. And fun fact, castor actually means beaver in Latin, if you didn't know. Both the male and female beavers produce this substance, and they use it for a variety of purposes. Beavers have a keen sense of smell, and they use Castoreum to mark their territory, often squirting it onto mounds of the dirt at the edges of their habitat. Interestingly, though, the act of secreting Castoreum is so forceful that if you were standing near a beaver, you could actually hear it.
That's not a pleasant thought at all. So if it's used to kind of like mark their habitat, does it vary from beaver to beaver?
That is a good question. Do you mean the sound or the strength of the
scent, I would imagine, right? Because it's kind of like dog pee, right? We think all dog pee smell the same, but if you ask my very fluffy Havanese, it is a wildly different experience for the dog.
I do think that there's like subtle nuances from beaver to beaver, much like ambergris or any other natural material. But there is something that is found in Castoreum that gives it its signature scent that we've thankfully been able to synthesize and recreate. So what they produce, the Castoreum, it's a waxy, fatty substance, and it also waterproofs their fur, which is super important for their survival as in the aquatic environment. In its raw form, Castoreum has a strong animalic odor that's not exactly pleasant, much like the other ones that we've discussed. But when it's processed, diluted, it has to go through the process of dilution, because if you're using just the raw base ingredient, it's bad. It's real bad. But once it goes through this process, it transforms into something entirely different. It's warm and leathery, even slightly sweet, has subtle hints of vanilla and even raspberry. This unique scent is what makes Castoreum very valuable in perfumery. First, let's get into the chemistry of Castoreum. So what makes it smell the way it does? Well, the secret lies in the chemical makeup, which includes compounds like castoreum, benzoic acid, and various phenols. The molecules work together to create a signature scent, a mix of leather, musk, and subtle smokiness. Castoreum, in particular, is a standout component, giving Castoreum its warm animalic edge. And interestingly, Castoreum also contains salicylic acid, the same compound found in aspirin, which might explain why historically it was used to treat headaches.
That's interesting.
I think that it was dried and powdered and then like added to like water or something. I can't imagine that they were just like sticking this like tar substance in their mouths.
Back in the day, the standards were a lot lower.
That's true. I mean, you lived to like 25 and you died from your teeth. So let's talk about its brief history. Its story in perfumery is as rich as its scent. It goes back thousands of years with ancient cultures like the Greeks and Romans valuing it for medicinal properties. Roman women, for example, believed that inhaling the fumes of burning castoreum could induce abortions. Spoiler alert, it didn't. I love that. I think that's like good reasoning, right? Because I'm sure if you probably do it with like mugwort or like wormwood, they have like abortifacient qualities. I love that idea of like, let's just set it on fire and breathe it in, right? It'll get rid of our baby.
But how many things did that solve back in that time too?
Yeah. And also abortions were a huge thing. It's been around like since the dawn of time, right? Like people being pregnant and not wanting to have a child. People were dying from childbirth so often. In the 12th century, the mystic and scholar Hildegard von Bingen recommended powdered castoreum, often mistaken for beaver testicles, because when it's dried, it like shrivels up. Gross.
Yep. Nasty.
As a remedy for fever when mixed with wine. And by the Middle Ages, castoreum had found its way into European perfumery, where it became a symbol of luxury and refinement. The colonialization of America brought a surge in demand for beaver pelts, which were often used to make hats. And castoreum actually experienced a resurgence as medicine, as it was sold in pharmacies to treat everything from toothaches to gout to insomnia, even as a general brain tonic, which is wild. My favorite thing is collecting antiques and like vintage like stuff. And I've got a few like all cure-all tonics, like old pharmacy bottles that like still have the pills in them that are like sealed and never opened. It's so interesting to me.
And they all have morphine. It's like morphine, cannabis, castoreum.
Like belladonna, like anything that's like insane. Back in the day, they were like, slap a label on it, we'll sell it.
Hey, get that bag.
So by the 19th century, castoreum had also made its way into perfumery as a fixative. It's an ingredient that helps scents last longer and smell richer. But castoreum's history isn't without its dark side. Traditionally, it was harvested by trapping and killing beavers to extract their castor sacs. This practice, combined with the demand of beaver pelts, pushed North American beavers to the brink of extinction by the late 19th century. As awareness of animal welfare grew into the 20th century, the use of natural castoreum began to decline, and the fragrance industry turned to synthetic alternatives. So, let's talk a little bit about the rise of synthetic castoreum. The development of synthetic castoreum was a game changer for perfumery. Chemists were able to isolate and replicate the key molecules responsible for its scent, creating synthetic versions that captured a warm, leathery, and animalic quality. The shift not only addressed ethical concerns, but also made castoreum more accessible and consistent in quality. Consistency is key. You got to think about like manufacturing, mass producing. If you're putting out a perfume to a large audience, you want it to smell the same across the board. And if you're using a natural ingredient, it's going to have subtle nuances and differences. So it's a way to, revolutionize the mass market.
Especially if the beavers are using it as a marker of their territory, their area, it's going to definitely change. Once you add in all of the other stuff in perfumery, it can get real wonky really quickly.
Its use is in a wide range of fragrances, from leathery chypres to rich ambers, offering the same depth and complexity as the natural version. Other synthetic molecules like isobutyl quinoline and birch tar are also used to mimic its effects, giving perfumers plenty of options to achieve similar results. So you don't even have to use the synthetic version. Despite its controversial past, castoreum remains a cherished ingredient In perfumery, its ability to add warmth, depth, and a touch of animalic intrigue to a fragrance is unparalleled. You'll find traces of Castoreum-inspired notes and iconic scents. It's a testament, though, to the creativity of perfumers and chemists that we can still enjoy the richness of Castoreum in a way that's ethical and sustainable.
Isn't Castoreum also what they use for like artificial or natural flavoring for raspberry? And it made everybody freak out.
It was vanilla. So, interesting fun fact, Castoreum was also used as a food additive, particularly in the early 20th century, to add a fruity vanilla-like note. However, due to the difficulty and expense of harvesting it from live beavers, its use in food is now extremely rare. Today, the fragrance industry is the primary consumer of Castoreum, with annual usage estimated around 300 pounds.
Still not great.
Yeah, still not great. You could still get like natural Castoreum, but I prefer the synthetic version, like for ethical and sustainable reasons.
And consistency.
Yeah, I can't imagine using things that come from animals. I get it, and I feel like that's so fucking witchy and like super pagan, of course, right? Like when we talk about like infusing like perfume with like animism and like all these different qualities from animals.
It's a potion, because we're potion witches.
Potion witches. But at the same time, I'm like, maybe let's not. I can't talk though, because I love curiosities and oddities and taxidermy. I love all of it. But I do have an issue with like when things are not ethically sourced or sustainable. Like, I don't think that we should be harming animals in order to use their byproducts in whatever it is.
Kind of like with the civet episode, keeping them in cages solely to use them for perfumery, not good.
How about we don't?
Yes, how about we don't? Not now. I think maybe back in the 1800s I could understand because they didn't have the technology to isolate what's making Castoreum smell like Castoreum. But now that we can and we have different materials, absolutely. Let the beavers be free.
Let them be free. Free the beavers. Yeah, so that's my part on the chemistry history of Castoreum.
Free the beavers. Actually, fun fact, is the segue for the fragrance of this week. Because the fragrance this week we are doing Zoologist Beaver.
Oh, I love that. It was my first time going to, I think it's called Lucky Scent in the East Village. And they had like the whole line of Zoologist perfumes, and I was able to smell them all. I know this fragrance.
I feel like we try to do popular ones. So with this being the last of the animals, and then we're going to go into different ingredients, Zoologist kept coming up for literally every single material. So I wanted to give it kind of like the final bang for this animal section and do Zoologist Beaver. So they do have a scent called Civet, which is based off of not just civetone, but also the environment of civets. Right. That's one of the things that I liked about Zoologist when I looked into them as a brand, is it wasn't just about, okay, what does this smell like, but what is their entire vibe? If we're doing this animal, what's their environment like? What's their lifestyle like? And Zoologist has gotten a ton of fragrance awards because they kind of have this different perspective for fragrance.
And their bottles are gorgeous. They're just stunning.
Oh yeah, the artwork, the bottles, everything's chef's kiss. So, Beaver was designed by the perfumer Chris Bartlett. Are you familiar with Chris Bartlett at all?
I'm not super familiar. I've heard this name, but I couldn't tell you a thing about him. Just, I know him from like a familiar like sphere of living in New York and knowing some of these perfumers.
Gotcha. Chris Bartlett is the creator behind Pell Wall.
Right.
So for those who are listening who might want to get interested in perfumery, Pell Wall did launch a number of fragrances from 2011 to 2013. He segued into being an ingredient supplier with particular focus on people who wanted to make perfumery a hobby. Basically, Chris Bartlett found that all of the ingredients were in mass market amounts and nobody could get small amounts to make perfumery a hobby. So they started Pell Wall so that you could buy small amounts of ambroxan or iso e-super, as well as perfumer's alcohol and basic ingredients that you need for perfumery. Chris Bartlett and Pell Wall was able to make that in amounts that you could just do it in your own time.
Which is fantastic. We need more of that. We need more accessibility when it comes to the small independent perfumer wanting to make perfumes and being able to access these ingredients without having to pay thousands of dollars for a kilo of fragrance.
That we're not going to need a full kilo of. It will expire by the time that we get halfway through it.
Right. I don't need a gallon of ambroxan. What am I going to do with that? That's crazy.
Exactly. And that's what Pell Wall really wanted to focus on. Bartlett said in an interview that he wanted to make Pell Wall more of a resource for people who wanted to get into perfumery. One of my favorite quotes is for the Pell Wall Ingredients website. It should be an educational resource as well as a shop. So I include quotations from other perfumers about the materials, as well as my own scent impressions and the thoughts about usage. But where Base Notes comes in, because we love Base Notes.
We do.
On the Pell Wall website, there's actually a link over to Base Notes specifically for the people who are trying to get into perfumery as a hobby. So we love this.
For those that are listening that are interested but are not familiar, is Pell Wall a American site? Is it European? Is it British?
Pell Wall is British, but they do ship all over. So
there are a few websites like this for those that are interested in getting into perfumery. Frauder Works is incredible. He's a huge Base Notes contributor as well, often giving great resources for alternatives to different things. But he's based out of New Zealand and also offers free shipping over a certain amount. And then if you're in North America, there is Perfumer's Apprentice, which is a great place to get aroma chemicals from.
We would love to see more perfumers and more people picking up perfumery as a hobby because it's awesome.
And I would be remiss if I didn't say it. There's also a Perfume Supply House.
So Bartlett has 2 collaborations with Zoologist, Beaver, which came out in 2014 but was reformulated in 2016, and Elephant.
Okay, he worked on Elephant. Love that.
Beaver was one of the 3 introductory scents from Zoologist. I found out so much about Beaver specifically. But my favorite thing about why Beaver was in their introductory trio was because Victor Wong, the founder and owner of Zoologist, is not a perfumer. He is a video game designer.
That to me is so cool. Yeah, I'm super into video games. I'm a video game designer. Well, let me make a perfume brand. What?
According to interviews, he had smelled a Labo and was like, what is this? And got into the world of niche perfumery very emphatically, very quickly. And that's when he decided, okay, I'm going to launch my own. He'd also always been obsessed with animals. So he knew that when he launched his niche perfumery, his inspiration was animal cards that he used to collect when he was a kid.
Oh,
so he started a niche perfume company, but he's based out of Canada. So everything's done in Toronto. And because he's based out of Toronto, he was like, I need something Canadian. And what's more Canadian than a beaver? And it's a pussy joke. I am paraphrasing because he did not say pussy joke. He said, I liked the double entendre in But essentially, yes, pussy joke. That's a general vibe. Just like, yep. I'm going to make the biggest beaver joke I possibly can and try to sell it to people. So originally, the 2014 version was a very poor seller. That's why it was reformulated 2 years later. The other ones that came out at the time were Rhinoceros and Panda, and both of those are a little bit more green. Even Bartlett, the creator of Beaver, said himself, this is a bit too avant-garde for people. And people might not like it. So, are you ready for reviews of the original.
Please tell me.
All right, I am going to send you one.
This is, at best, an acquired taste, and at worst, straight up repulsive, and I think whether this works or fails rests entirely on individual skin chemistry. The composition very much reminds me of summers in the south of Sweden, and the smell of a cow pasture after the rain. Oof. So essentially cow shit and mud, wet fur, grass, and wild flowers. I wouldn't say it's gag-worthy or anything, but it's definitely not an appealing scent. From afar, it genuinely smells quite pleasant, but up close it's simply too fecal for me to get past. I definitely see the inspiration taken from beavers with a mix of fresh, slightly aquatic notes with the wet fur fecal notes, but to me, this screams cow more than beaver. Yeah, roasted.
Roasted. But I also think that based off of the ingredient conversation that we had, if you're thinking about Castoreum, it is literally from sacks by the tail of the beaver. So we are talking about the general butthole area. So it makes sense that people would pick up on fecal when it's talking about Castoreum in the beaver perfume.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite reviews was, "This is so specific, but this smells like those Please Touch Natural History Museum displays with animal pelt specimens, but with a transparent soapy note over it." This is the last review that we have, and it's all about Castoreum specifically.
I was so excited for this because I really thought I'd love it, but oh my god, I almost started crying scrubbing this off because I was about to go out and it smelled so bad on me. I'm getting emotional thinking about this. There was a little bit of fresh water, river, flower smell, but the Castoreum was so strong. Oh my god, it smelled like urine to me, like wet, mildewy, urine-soaked wood. I thought it was still on me later that night while on the street until my boyfriend said, "It smells like piss over here." And I thought, oh, thank God, it's actually pee on someone or something, and not the lingering scent of beaver. I'm terrified. Have never had a reaction to a perfume like this. I don't think I'll ever risk a Castoreum note ever again. Damn. People really struggle with it. I think it's one of those notes that I think it's, especially if they're using like the raw, like natural Castoreum, it would be super easy to overdose it and make it a little too poopy smelling.
Well, yes, and I agree with that. But I do think that from the general vibes of Zoologist, the whole ethos behind Zoologist is not necessarily going for a super pretty
Wearable
kind of a fragrance, right? It's going for that avant-garde art piece.
Right. Exactly. Because perfumery is an art form. And yeah, I've got a perfume like that. People do wear my scent on a regular basis, but I'm like, I designed this as like a piece of art, not for everyday use. So yeah, I get that.
Is it your mushroom one?
It is the mushroom one.
Your mushroom one.
It's so weird. People either love it or they hate it. They're like, get it away from me.
I love it, but I wasn't going to blind buy it. Then once I smelled it, I was like, yes, shut up. Take my money. What's the name of it?
The Necromantion. Those were the temple dedicated to Hades and Persephone. It's where you would go to talk to spirits of the dead.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking metal. But yeah, like, and if you're local to New York, there's a fabulous place. If, like us, you view perfume as an art form, there's a fabulous place in Chinatown called Olfactory Art Keller, and it's an art gallery dedicated to scent. So they have different shows that you can go and see. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Weren't you in one?
I before I left New York, I was in a group show called Portraits and Scent. And it was where me, along with like several other perfumers, got to choose a person. It could be from mythology, it could be fiction, nonfiction, whoever, a family member, to base a perfume off of what they would smell like that represents them. And it was fantastic. Someone did something from like The Shining. They did like a Jack perfume. Someone did like Britney Spears. Someone did their grandmother, which was fabulous. My friend Arena from Phoenix Botanical, she did Kurt Cobain's sweater. It smelled like cigarettes and white lilies. It was so sick. And it was like from like one of his performances on, I believe it was VH1. Where he was wearing like a cashmere sweater and like smoking a cigarette while playing. And then I did a portrait of Agnes Sampson, who was a witch, who was, well, we say witch. She was a woman who was a midwife who was tried and executed for witchcraft. So I used like, it was such a fun moment. I tinctured and powdered animal bones to like put into the perfume, not because it added a scent, but because of the art of powdering like animal bone and tincturing it to give it that like animalic quality, almost the energy of that, you know. I used this like really gorgeous, fabulous bottle that was from like the early 1900s, super gorgeous, by an Italian designer. The bulb for it was like rotted, so I had to replace that, but it was fabulous. I put like human molars in the perfume bottle. I went ham on it, honestly. I'm like really proud of myself for it. I found seaweed specific to the area of Scotland and I tinctured it for the perfume. So it smells like very like seaweed, mildewy, musky, damp, very actually close to Necromantia. Necromantion is inspired by that perfume that I made.
Awesome. See, guys, get into perfumery and you too can be in a museum.
Conceptual like perfumery and like it's just so sick. It's an art form. Respected as art.
Why I like Zoologist and focusing on Zoologist for this particular episode, because they definitely look at it as an art form and they get a bunch of rewards. So
what's your favorite Zoologist perfume?
So I have two.
I have
both
one.
of them I really like, and both of them are my two personalities. One is bee, because I'm obsessed with bees, and my name is Melissa, and your name is... For those of you who don't know, Melissa means honeybee in Greek. The other one is moth.
Moth. Ooh, okay. I really love hummingbird.
Okay.
That one to me is my favorite. It's like a little transparent, but like still kind of flowery. It's beautiful.
See, I'm not a flowery person. I was like gourmand and dust. My two personalities. But also I'm such like a sun rising and like moon kind of a person. So yeah. I'm just like, yeah, my two personalities are the sun and the moon, bee and moth.
I love it. Yeah, the whole line is fantastic. If you haven't smelled it, go out and smell it. In Philly, if you're local to Philly, there's a place called Perfumology. And they carry all of the Zoologist perfumes.
Well, what's interesting about Zoologist, besides the fact that Victor, the owner, gets the recipes and bottles them, or at least was doing that up until like 2020, but all of the fragrances he outsources to perfumers. So a lot of these fragrances are designed by people who work for IFF or are part of these big fragrance houses, but they get to make this kind of unique artwork for Zoologists in a way that they can't for their typical commercially viable fragrances, which I really like.
So cool. Yeah.
So what I think, moving on to Beaver specifically, once they reformulated it, the reviews changed. It's also 2 years after the initial line. So Zoologist became known for kind of like those avant-garde, not daily wearable kind of fragrances. So here's a review after the reformulation.
I'm surprised how much I like this. It's much more fresh and wearable than I was expecting. Most of what I'm smelling is just wood, but it's very realistic and comforting wood. I've prepared myself for stinky beaver butt, but you didn't get it. You got something enjoyable. That's cool.
So I thought that was interesting, where it was like, oh, so now 2 years after the fact, when it was this poor seller because it was too weird, now you're saying it's too generic. My friend had commented when she checked the notes that she was glad to see vanilla because beaver glands smell like vanilla. The vanilla is the animalic note, LOL. I Googled it, and it's a thing, and I love knowing this fact.
Yeah.
It was another review, and I was like, okay, so now it's too generic? So, very recently, Zoologist launched Beaver Maple Edition, a fragrance designed by Pascal Goron, since Bartlett unfortunately passed away in July of 2024.
It's awful.
Pascal Goron sounded familiar to me. I don't know why I know that name, but I definitely know that name. He's the nose behind Plum and Cognac from Scents of Wood.
Oh, okay. I'm not familiar with.
He's also created Queens and Monsters for Henry Rose, which is Michelle Pfeiffer's fragrance company.
Yeah, I have heard of this. Cool.
So the description for Beaver Maple Edition is like a carefully crafted lodge of a beaver family. This scent offers warmth while hinting at hidden depths. So
Very
less
cool.
fresh water, which is the original Beaver.
This seems like a little bit more like gourmand with like subtle like floral hints.
Correct. Could be fun.
I wonder if my niche perfume place here in Philly will carry it.
And that's what I have for Zoologist Beaver.